Okay, now I'm sure you're thinking, okay, Gwen, great. You just rambled on in 2 videos about the nature of evil, but we're talking about evil people. Well, you have to define evil before you can define whether or not people are evil. Now, within the modern world, there's been a lot of talk about empathy. And empathy seems to be what makes humans, or puts the humanity in humans. We empathize with other people, and it leads us to be ethical because we put ourselves in their place and we think, well, we don't want that done to us. I know how that makes me feel, so therefore I'm not going to do that. And when they have studied psychopaths, they seem to lack that quality of empathy. And so we tend to define evil as hurting other people in one way or another. It's not okay to murder somebody because you're taking away that person's life, and we don't want to suffer, so we don't want to make other people suffer. We don't steal because we know how it feels to have things stolen from us, and the same thing with lying. But again, within those parameters, we still do those things. So most of us don't murder. Most of us don't even kill. But I will say that I have been guilty of lying. Did I ever steal anything? No, but I've wanted to. And no, officer, I didn't know how fast I was going. And so if we look at it from that way, and then we look at some of these evil people and deities within mythology, they hurt other people. Loki, one of the worst things he did was he refused to cry for Balder. When Ereshkigal said, I will release Balder from the underworld if every creature in the world cries. And Loki disguises himself as an old woman and refuses to cry. And so he hurts Balder. He also hurts Odin and hurts the other gods because they all loved Balder. Loki also is a key character in bringing about Ragnarok, which of course is very harmful. When the world ends, it's very harmful. But at the same time, out of destruction comes creation. And I mentioned this in the PowerPoint on male villains, because Shiva in Hindu mythology is the destroyer. And Shiva as Rudra is what brings about the end of the cycles of the world. But it is a necessary thing because then a new world is created. So out of destruction comes creation. And because creation exists, then destruction exists. And so it's a paradox. It's an oxymoron. I'm not going to call it a hypocrisy, but that sense of duality exists there. And even within the same deities, even we see this in the Greeks and the Egyptians and the Sumerian deities, where I said they might not be all bad, but they're not all good either. But then within monotheism, you have the all good deity, but there is still the duality, because within monotheistic religions, there is still the opposer, that entity who fights against the one God. Now that entity is not a God, because then it wouldn't be monotheistic, which creates some paradoxes, especially in Zoroastrianism. So these main players that we see who are evil in myth, they're either hurting other people or they're hurting other gods. Now, I talked some about just about Loki, and I talked about Eve, and I talked about Pandora. And of course, I've made another video I'm holding over from the World Myth class that I'm showing about Lilith. But Lilith is interesting because she goes from Sumeria, where at first Gilgamesh calls her sister, but then later she is known as being dangerous to male children. And then in Judaism, she is all children are susceptible to her. What's the word I want? I don't want to say wiles, but they are subject to being killed by her. And then she is seen as a succubus. And then in the modern world, Lilith becomes a role model because she refused to have connubial relations with Adam in other than he would not do have connubial relations other than the missionary style. And she left him, and she said, I'm going to go do what it is that I want to do. Back to the disobedience. Back to the disobedience. And so Lilith is certainly a character who underwent a lot of transformation and evolution over the ages. And so I'm trying to gather my thoughts here. And so evil is a constant theme in all mythoi, regardless of how evil is defined by that culture. It is something that permeates all cultures, all societies, always has, and very likely always will. Now I want to say one more thing about Pandora, and then I am going to be quiet. Yes, I know that's very difficult for you to believe, but I'm going to try to be quiet. When Pandora closed the chest or slapped the lid back on the urn, hope was left in the chest. And most people interpret that as a good thing, because without hope, humanity wouldn't continue on. They would just give up, and humanity might have become extinct a long time ago. But on the other hand, some people say that hope is an illusion. Yeah, it keeps humans going, but you can hope all you want, but that's not going to make anything change. And I said I was going to be quiet, but I'm not, because I have one more thing. Some religions say that it is free will. Free will is what causes evil. Because people are given free will and are allowed to make up their minds and make their decisions, then they are free to be disobedient. But there's also the very strong concept of fate in most religions. We've certainly seen it throughout the hero stories. And so if people are fated, if they're locked into a course of action that they cannot get out of, then is free will not negated? And does free will preclude the fact that people are always going to be disobedient? These are ways that people have tried to explain the existence of evil in the world for a very long time. And the existence of evil includes, in some religions, the aspect of free will. And disobedience is usually the beginning of that. And hurting other people. And acting not for the greater good of society. Being the psychopath who is only concerned about him or herself. One more thing, and then I'm really going to be shut up. Knowledge. Eve is whacked upside the head because she seeks knowledge. And if you remember, this was Oedipus's problem and eventually led to his downfall, and Arthur also. So are we wrong to seek knowledge? Is that an evil thing? Or does it only become wrong or dangerous when we seek knowledge that is going to harm us? And what if we don't know until it's too late that it's going to harm us? Boy, that was disconnected, but just some food for thought, and I'm going to stop there. Really, I am.